Coming up today, meeting directly for the first time, President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe agreed to accelerate talks on resolving Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. Korea's National Assembly is in gridlock as the rival parties dig themselves in on the government's controversial decision to reintroduce a state-authored history textbook into the nation's secondary schools. Plus, did a bomb bring down a Russian plane over Egypt? The airline thinks so, but Moscow says it's too early to speculate. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello to our viewers around the world. It's 6 a.m. on Tuesday, November 3rd here in Seoul. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with the summit in Seoul that some would say was a long time coming. President Park Geun-hye and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe held their first ever official face-to-face talks on Monday. For more on the meeting and what to expect for South Korea-Japan relations going forward, Hwang Sang-hee reports.
Topping the agenda at President Park's first ever summit with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe was Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of Korean women. At the start of the talks, President Park expressed her hopes for the summit.
오늘 회담이 아픈 역사를 치유할 수 있는 대승적이고 또 진심 어린 그런 회담이 돼서 앞으로 양국 관계를 발전시켜 나가는 소중한 계기가 되기를 기대합니다.
However, Prime Minister Abe's focus was on building a future-oriented relationship with Seoul.
I think highly of the steps we took in Japan-Korea relations over the last 50 years. I am willing to work with President Park to open a new era for a future-oriented Japan-Korea relationship.
More than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military before and during World War II. And with only 47 comfort women remaining in Korea, President Park urged for a swift resolution, calling it the biggest stumbling block to their bilateral relations. The presidential office of Cheongwade said the two leaders agreed to work on the issue.
The two leaders acknowledged that this year marks the 50th anniversary of normalizing diplomatic ties and commanded that the Comfort Women talks be sped up so the issue can be resolved as early as possible.
Other agenda items included increasing cooperation on countering North Korean threats, as well as Korea's possible joining of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Prime Minister Abe said he was closely following Korea's movements regarding the 12-nation trade pact that includes Japan and the U.S. The presidential office of Cheongwade says that Monday's summit was meaningful in that it paved the way for resolving historical issues and laid the groundwork for further progress in bilateral relations. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, staying with Korea-Japan relations, and attention is now drawn to Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's remarks at home following his bilateral talks with President Park Geun-hye. In an interview with Japan's BS Fiji TV on Monday, Abe admitted it would be difficult for Seoul and Tokyo to find a solution that is supported entirely by their respective people, but he added it was possible to find common ground through negotiations. Other Japanese media reported on Abe's statement, highlighting the importance of the latest development. Observers here in Korea say that since Abe showed a positive stance on finding a solution, it shows the agreement to resolve the issue on Monday was not just empty talk. Now, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang says he's working to maximize the economic synergy between Korea and his country. Wrapping up his three-day stay in Seoul on Monday, China's #2 suggested linking Korea's creative economy drive with China's entrepreneurship initiative. Song Ji-sun reports.
I'm glad Korea and China have had meaningful talks through this visit, and we will now work together for a prosperous future through joint efforts and cooperation.
With Monday the last day of his visit, China's Premier Li Keqiang sat down with South Korea's Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-an. At a forum designed to foster youth exchange and collaboration through a creative economy, the two ministers discussed ways to establish a Korea-China innovation platform, pledging to set up an innovation complex in Midwest China for young leaders in the two countries. Li said that now is the best time to beef up youth exchanges between the two countries in both academics and employment. Before departing, Li visited an innovation center in Gyeonggi-do Province to see how Seoul nurtures IT startups. Stressing that the two countries are both implementing innovation strategies, Li said that Beijing also wants to incorporate President Park's creative economy drive into Beijing's entrepreneurship initiative. It is time for some action. Li says he hopes the two countries can transform their mutual agreement into actual achievements and that this visit is the first stepping stone in upgrading their bilateral relations to a new level. 송지선, Arirang News.
Now, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang's visit to Seoul has opened the door for 3 of Korea's trademark foods to reach Chinese households. For more on the quintessential Korean dishes Chinese will soon be able to enjoy in their homes, Geun-hye reports.
Many people will be able to enjoy this delicious food once it's imported to China.
That delicious food Chinese Premier Li Keqiang talked about during his visit to Korea is samgyetang, a traditional Korean ginseng chicken soup. Korean President Park Geun-hye and Li signed a number of MOUs on the sidelines of their bilateral summit over the weekend, including an agreement to have Korea export 3 of its signature food products, rice, kimchi, and samgyetang.
I think it's a good idea because I tried samgyetang at a restaurant, but never seen it packaged and sold in China.
Experts say in the short term, the 3 products won't largely increase Korea's export figures, but it'll make an impression.
It is very meaningful and important in terms of harmonizing food safety system between the two countries. The Chinese government actually changed their food safety regulation to receive our most representative product.
Breaking it down, exporting rice represents a long-awaited yes from Beijing since Seoul's request to open the market back in 2009. For Korea's favorite fermented cabbage side dish kimchi, the MOU supports hopes of narrowing a deficit. Last year, kimchi exports accounted for only 1/10 of its imports, while those imports were 99% from none other than China.
Both Korean rice and kimchi taste good. I enjoy them and would buy them if they're exported to China.
Anticipation is spreading fast as stocks of Korea's major chicken companies skyrocketed Monday. The latest arrangement, however, has no legal binding to the Korea-China FDA, which still needs to be ratified by both sides.
Experts say if everything goes smoothly, people in China will have Korean kimchi on their plates by the end of the year, rice in January, and samgyetang in the first half of next year. Geun-hye, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea and the United States have reiterated that they will stand strong against North Korea's persistent nuclear and missile threats. The statement came after the defense chiefs of the two allies met in Seoul on Monday. Connie Kim reports.
South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-gu and his U.S. counterpart Ashton Carter have agreed to strengthen the two countries' combined defenses against North Korea's threats.
We have decided to strongly and jointly respond to any of North Korea's provocative threats in the future based on the robust South Korea-US alliance.
Condemning North Korea's test of a submarine-launched ballistic missile in May, Han and Carter also expressed concern over North Korea's possible missile and nuclear testing. With its modified KN-08 intercontinental missile revealed during a military parade last month, and threats of a potential long-range rocket launch, threats from Pyongyang have increased. Stating that North Korean aggression or military provocation will not be tolerated, the U.S. Defense Secretary said North Korea's 2010 torpedo attack on the warship Cheonan and its heavily fortified demilitarized zone are evidence of continuing North Korean threats.
Both are stark reminders that North Korea is an up-close, dangerous, and continuing threat to the security of the peninsula and the region.
To better deal with the North's threats, Han and Carter approved the implementation guidance on the concepts of ROK-US Alliance Comprehensive Counter-Missile Operations, or the 4D operational concept, to detect, disrupt, destroy, and defend against Pyongyang's provocations. The two also reaffirmed their commitment to develop Seoul's missile defense systems, Kill Chain, and the Korea Air Missile Defense System against North Korean missile threats by mid-2020. Until South Korea has full capabilities to conduct intelligence and counter-artillery operations against North Korea, the two allies agreed to delay the planned return of the current Washington-held wartime operational control of South Korean troops. The timing is now expected to be around mid-2020 when Seoul completes its Kill Chain system and the KAMD development. Carter left for Malaysia on Monday to attend the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus, where he's expected to exchange defense ideas with member nations. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea's domestic political situation is expected to spiral further into turmoil following the government's decision to accelerate the announcement of its policy to revise the country's publication system of history textbooks. Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn and Education Minister Hwang Woo-yeol are scheduled to hold a briefing later on this Tuesday to disclose detailed plans and schedules for the reintroduction of the state-authored books. The announcement, which has been moved up a couple of days, reflects the government and the ruling Saenuri Party's decision to put an end to the prolonged dispute. However, as the main opposition is strongly against the policy, concerns are mounting that pending bills will just gather dust at the National Assembly. The New Politics Alliance for Democracy, which launched a sit-in protest in front of the Assembly on Monday, which you can see there, has vowed to boycott today's parliamentary session. Now, we have reported on the Korean economy picking up pace in the third quarter. We did so a few weeks ago, but upon closer inspection, the strongest quarterly growth since 2010 was in fact largely fueled by extra government spending. Hwang Jae reports.
Korea's finance ministry says government-led spending and investment boosted the country's third quarter growth by up to 1 percentage point. Considering that the Korean economy grew 1.2% in the 3 months from the previous quarter, it was mainly extra government money that led the strongest quarterly growth since 2010. Between July and September, over 66% of the government's supplementary budget was expended. Korea's traditional growth engine, exports, however, dragged third quarter growth down by 0.7 percentage points. And with global demand showing little sign of picking up pace due to China's slowing economy, the government plans to maintain its expansionary policy for the time being. But concerns linger over Korea's fiscal health, while the finance ministry claims that Korea cannot just sit and talk about fiscal soundness when all other countries like Japan are in an expansionary mode. The expanded budget will increase the country's overall sovereign debt to over 40% of GDP next year, pushing it to a record high.
The national debt has been steadily rising since 2012 as the government poured extra money into the sluggish economy. But in the face of a rapidly aging society, the figure could spike down the road.
Still, the debt ratio is relatively low compared to other OECD nations, with the average standing at over 110%. In a recent report, the IMF suggested Korea prop up its ailing economy through budget expansion, while adding its fiscal health is the world's second strongest behind Norway. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
The Russian airline whose plane crashed over Egypt on Saturday has ruled out pilot error or a technical fault, saying that an external influence was the only possible explanation. But the head of Russia's Federal Aviation Agency has said the remarks were not based on facts and it was premature to speculate. US officials say there's not enough evidence to link the crash to terrorism. Washington's Director of National Intelligence says there's no direct evidence of any terrorist involvement yet. However, James Clapper said the US couldn't conclusively rule out that the Islamic State militant group had the capability to shoot down a passenger plane. IS has claimed responsibility for the crash on Twitter. Saturday's crash over the Sinai Peninsula killed all 224 people on board. European election observers have criticised Turkey's parliamentary elections, complaining of violence and restrictions on freedom of expression. A spokesperson for the Council of Europe said Sunday's polls, which gave the governing AK party a clear majority, were free but not fair. He said the security environment, arrests of opposition activists and stifling of press freedoms combined to give the AK party a massive advantage. However, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turks freely voted for stability and the world must respect the result. Well, that's all we have on this Tuesday morning here in Seoul. Thank you as always for tuning in. We'll be back throughout the day with more newscasts. Goodbye.